Hey guys, Sabri Subi here. So today we're going to be going over and really doing a masterclass on master communicators. I'm talking about like figures that are really just master orators and they really know this craft. And they really captured the public's attention and motivated nations and shaped our history forever simply with the power of their words. Now, persuasion, guys, it just goes well beyond sales, okay? Being able to sell is really the ability to be able to communicate in an effective and a compelling way that gets people to buy into what you are saying and buy into your agenda and your motivations. And communication skills is really the single most important skill that you can attain in your life, bar none, okay? Because it's really what you're doing every day in every single thing that you do, whether it's written communication, verbal communication, it does not matter, okay? So mastering these principles that are inside this course will serve you for the rest of your life. And we're going to be taking a look at really the best of the best today, okay? I'm talking about master orators who have moved mountains with their words. And while I don't agree with all the views expressed by these master communicators that we're going to be studying, you know, that's not really what's up for debate here, okay? Because like there's a lot of political and religious views and there's a lot of outlandish things that, you know, these people have said and done, and that's not what I want you to pay attention to. That's not why I've brought them to today's masterclass. The reason is that we simply want to be looking at the effectiveness of how they motivated the masses with their words, and that cannot be argued, okay? They are absolute master orators. These guys have really, you know, gone out and really motivated nations and masses to do all types of crazy things and have got into like the most powerful positions in the world and most powerful offices in the world purely just through the way in which they communicate, and they really sell their idea and they present themselves and their agenda. So without further ado, let's dive in. So the first master communicator that we'll be looking at today is Barack Obama. Now, Obama rose to prominence when he gave an electrifying speech in 2004 in front of the Democratic National Convention. Now, as we watch the following videos, I want you to pay particular attention not to the words in which they speak, but how they say them, okay? So we're looking specifically at the meta-verbal communication, the pitch, the pace, tone, volume, and the pauses between words and how they're using them to really kind of emphasize certain points. Now, watch how Obama uses this, right? Watch how he uses his tone to add impact to the narrative and, you know, his gestures to really emphasize certain points. And pauses, he really uses pauses incredibly well to heighten and increase the drama. And also his pace is on point to really keep you engaged in what he's saying. So I'll let this roll and watch this and really pay attention. Don't just get sucked into the message and what he's saying, but I really want you to pay close attention to that meta-verbal communication. All right, let me let it roll.
Tonight is a particular honor for me because, let's face it, my presence on this stage is pretty unlikely. My father was a foreign student, born and raised in a small village in Kenya. He grew up herding goats, went to school in a tin roof shack. His father, my grandfather, was a cook, a domestic servant to the British. But my grandfather had larger dreams for his son. Through hard work and perseverance, my father got a scholarship to study in a magical place, America, that shone as a beacon of freedom and opportunity to so many who had come before. While studying here, my father met my mother. She was born in a town on the other side of the world, in Kansas. Her father worked on oil rigs and farms through most of the Depression. The day after Pearl Harbor, my grandfather signed up for duty, joined Patton's army, marched across Europe. Back home, my grandmother raised a baby and went to work on a bomber assembly line. After the war, they studied on the GI Bill, bought a house through FHA, and later moved west, all the way to Hawaii in search of opportunity. And they too had big dreams for their daughter. A common dream born of two continents. My parents shared not only an improbable love, they shared an abiding faith in the possibilities of this nation. They would give me an African name, Barak, or Blessed, believing that in a tolerant America, your name is no barrier to success. They imagined me going to the best schools in the land, even though they weren't rich, because in a generous America, you don't have to be rich to achieve your potential. They're both passed away now. And yet I know that on this night, they look down on me with great pride. They stand here, and I stand here today, grateful for the diversity of my heritage, aware that my parents' dreams live on in my two precious daughters. I stand here knowing that my story is part of the larger American story, that I owe a debt to all of those who came before me, and that in no other country on earth is my story even possible.
So did you see the precision in which Obama uses his meta-verbal communication? And really notice Obama's use of downward inflection. So a downward inflection occurs when you lower the pitch of your voice, making it deeper on certain words. This really communicates confidence, authority, and certainty in the message that really he's delivering, as opposed to upward inflection, right? Which is like an upward inflection occurs when you raise the pitch of your voice on a particular word. Now, an upward inflection really communicates surprise, doubt, and uncertainty. And they aren't really qualities that you want to emphasize as when you're looking to kind of assume the most powerful position in an office anywhere in the world, one could argue, right? So a downward inflection is when you're saying something and you're really lowering your pitch at the end of what you're saying. Let's leave right now. Right? It's a very authoritative tone to take, and it also asserts confidence in the message that I'm delivering. No, now, as opposed to like an upward inflection, it's like, how you going today? Do you know what I mean? As somebody that's looking to kind of get elected to become president, then you don't really want to be sounding all bubbly and, upward inflecting like that. You want to really have that confidence, okay? So I'm going to let another video play right now, and I really want you to pay attention of how Obama is using downward inflection in his speech.
Tonight, we gather to affirm the greatness of our nation. Not because of the height of our skyscrapers or the power of our military or the size of our economy. Our pride is based on a very simple premise, summed up in a declaration made over 200 years ago. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That is the true genius of America. A faith in simple dreams, an insistence on small miracles, that we can tuck in our children at night and know that they are fed and clothed and safe from harm, that we can say what we think, write what we think without hearing a sudden knock on the door, that we can have an idea and start our own business without paying a bribe, that we can participate in the political process without fear of retribution, and that our votes will be counted, at least most of the time. This year, in this election, we are called to reaffirm our values and our commitments, to hold them against a hard reality, and see how we're measuring up to the legacy of our forebears and the promise of future generations. And fellow Americans, Democrats, Republicans, independents, I say to you tonight, we have more work to do.
So did you see that? Did you see how authoritative he is? How he's using the downward inflection at the end of every single statement that he's making. And also another part of his speech that you really want to notice is that the use of pauses, right? Nothing can be more dramatic than a well-placed pause. And he really does it to kind of make an impact and kind of command you and really have that authority and really make you listen to the power of words that he's saying. And that's all those meta verbal communication cues that he's doing that to heighten, that message of his words. Now, however, I don't want you to think that, this is just for like powerful speeches, because you're probably thinking at this stage, well, I'm not going to be out there in front of thousands of people giving speeches, Sabri. Like I'm going to be on sales calls or I'm going to be doing, one-to-one selling. How do these apply? Well, these this isn't just for powerful speeches, right? These principles apply for all communication. So now let's take a look at a debate between, Mitt Romney and Obama. And again, pay attention to Obama's meta-verbal communication, all right? Now, Obama lowers his inflection at the end of each sentence, making it more powerful and gives the audience the impression that he believes his own message. So let me let this one run.
To America, long term, and we must have a comprehensive strategy to help reject this kind of extremism.
Mr. President.
Well, my first job as Commander-in-Chief, Bob, is to keep the American people safe. And that's what we've done over the last 4 years. We ended the war in Iraq, refocused our attention on those who actually killed us on 9/11. And as a consequence, al-Qaeda's core leadership has been decimated. In addition, we're now able to transition out of Afghanistan in a responsible way, making sure that Afghans take responsibility for their own security. And that allows us also to rebuild alliances and make friends around the world to combat future threats. Now, with respect to Libya, as I indicated in the last debate, when we received that phone call, I immediately made sure that, number one, we did everything we could to secure those Americans who were still in harm's way. Number two, that we would investigate exactly what happened. And number three, most importantly, that we would go after those who killed Americans, and we would bring them to justice. And that's exactly what we're going to do. But I think it's important to step back and think about what happened in Libya. And keep in mind that I and Americans took leadership in organizing an international coalition that made sure that we were able to, without putting troops on the ground, at the cost of less than what we spent in 2 weeks in Iraq, liberate a country that had been under the yoke of dictatorship for 40 years. Got rid of a despot who had killed Americans. And as a consequence, despite this tragedy, you had tens of thousands of Libyans after the events in Benghazi marching and saying, America is our friend. We stand with them. Now, that represents the opportunity we have to take advantage of. And, Governor Romney, I'm glad that you agree that we have been successful in going after al-Qaeda. But I have to tell you that your strategy previously has been one that has been all over the map and is not designed to keep Americans safe or to build on the opportunities that exist in the Middle East.
So I hope you picked up on all the little subtleties of that metaverbal communication and exactly how he's controlling his pace and his tone and his pauses and delivery throughout that. Now, let's jump onto another clip here, also from Obama. Now, this clip is from Obama's 2012 victory speech. Watch and listen at how at the end of the speech, okay, he increases the pace and volume of his vocal delivery to add impact to his words and really heighten the emotions. I'll let this run now.
America, I believe we can build on the progress we've made and continue to fight for new jobs and new opportunity and new security for the middle class. I believe we can keep the promise of our founding. The idea that if you're willing to work hard, it doesn't matter who you are or where you come from or what you look like or where you love. It doesn't matter whether you're black or white or Hispanic or Asian or Native American or young or old or rich or poor, able, disabled, gay or straight. You can make it here in America if you're willing to try. I believe we can seize this future together because we are not as divided as our politics suggests. We're not as cynical as the pundits believe. We are greater than the sum of our individual ambitions, and we remain more than a collection of red states and blue states. We are and forever will be the United States of America. And together, with your help and God's grace, we will continue our journey forward and remind the world just why it is that we live in the greatest nation on earth. Thank you, America. God bless you. God bless these United States.
There you have it. Look, Obama does an incredible job to use that pace and volume to really heighten the emotions and just work that crowd into a complete frenzy. Like, these guys are just going nuts. And that's literally, the whole speech really builds up to that point. And then he really kind of starts to increase that pace, increase his volume and really kind of heighten that overall vibe and mood in the room from everything that he's saying. All right, so now let's turn the page onto something that is radically different, okay? Adolf Hitler. Now, the rise of Hitler and the Nazi movement serves really as like a frightening reminder of how powerful like a strong oratory presence can be. And especially, even when it's used for evil. And it's just, it's very, very controversial even talking about this kind of topic and talking about him as an orator. But, Hitler gave over 5,000 speeches in his time. And why his motives were deplorable, his supernatural ability to tap into like the prejudices and the fears of a nation and motivate them to really blindly follow him were grippingly powerful. Now, the Nazi leader, Adolf Hitler, bewitched his audience and promised them that his empire would reign for thousands of years, right? Hitler was known to write his own speeches and edit them like 5 to 6 times, different times before he would actually go out in front of a crowd and give them. And he would work deep into the night, several evenings running, like occupying 3 secretaries, taking dictation straight into typewriters before carefully correcting the drafts, okay? This is someone who really understood the importance of giving a very powerful speech. He simply didn't want to rely on anyone to write his speeches. Public speaking was so important to Hitler that he wouldn't even trust anyone to write his speeches for him. He acknowledged and he kind of workshopped his delivery and hand gestures and body language while practicing his speeches meticulously, all right? Now, naturally, these speeches that I'm about to run for you are in German, okay? But what I want you to observe and take from this is Hitler's presence, his pauses, hand gestures, and volume. He rants and raves about the injustices done to Germany, and he plays into the audience's emotion and hatred and envy, right? By the end of these speeches, just look at the audience, right? They are just like in a state of near hysteria. Observe how he does this through his delivery of these words.
Volksgenossen und Genossinnen, meine deutschen Arbeiter, ich bin aus euch selbst herausgewachsen. Bin einst selbst unter euch gestanden, bin in 4,5 Jahren Krieg wieder mitten unter euch gewesen und habe mich dann durch Fleiß, durch Lernen und ich kann sagen durch Hungern langsam emporgearbeitet. In meinem innersten Wesen bin ich immer das geblieben, was ich. Unseren Augen, da muss der deutsche Junge der Zukunft schlank und rank sein. Flink wie Witthunde, zäh wie Leder und hart wie Kruppstahl. Wir sind entschlossen, ein neues Geschlecht heranzuziehen. Sie reden nicht von den Zehntausenden, die Jahr für Jahr den Gashahn aufdrehen. dass eben doch dann einmal die Stunde kommt, in der die Millionen, die uns heute verfluchen, hinter uns stehen und mit uns begrüßen werden dann das gemeinsam geschaffene, wiedererkämpfte, wiedererfahrene, neue deutsche Reich der Größe und der Ehre und der Kraft und der Herrlichkeit. Das alles ist heiß! Die große Zeit ist jetzt angebrochen. Der Schluss ist nun erwacht. Die Macht haben wir nun in Deutschland gewonnen. Und wir müssen ein Reich sehen. Und ihr müsst euch schon dafür erziehen. Wir wollen, dass dieses Volk einst gehorsam ist. Und ihr müsst euch in den Gehorsam üben. Wir wollen, dass dieses Volk ein friedliebes und aber auch tapfer ist. Und ihr müsst friedfertig sein.
Now, look, it is clear to see that Hitler's communication and speech style was intensely emotional, somewhat violent, and completely hypnotic. And the thing that I really, want to do a head nod to is that, like any master, it takes a lot of work to be able to deliver speeches like this. And that's something that Hitler was very aware of. He would practice, like just his work ethic towards practicing his speeches, after everything else that was obviously going on during this time, shows, really the power and the importance placed on delivering a masterful presentation, to his troops and to this mass movement, that he was really riling up to really go to war with the rest of the world. And as I said, while his message is completely deplorable, and I obviously don't agree with it, there's no taking away that this guy certainly knew how to motivate and speak and really get people engaged and buying into his message. So next up in this Master Communicators Masterclass is Ronald Reagan. So he's the former US president. Ronald Reagan was trained as an actor and then found his way into politics and was really a master communicator, so much so that he got his nickname, the Great Communicator. He had an uncanny ability to really kind of connect with his audience. He used a simple vocabulary, and his speeches and communication was succinct and to the point. Now, let's study him and let's pay very close attention to his speech patterns, his pace, pitch, tone, volume, and pauses. Now, I particularly want you to pay attention to how he uses humor to warm up the audience and then quickly changes his tonality from using like a level inflection, which is when there is no change in pitch within a vowel, and then he moves on to a more serious topics. He shifts to using a downward inflection, right? And watch and pay very close attention to how he does that, because you can see it in black and white from the start of this speech and then to when he's moving on to these serious topics.
He had to go for days on end with very little sleep during the Cuba Missile Crisis. Is there any doubt in your mind that you would be able to function in such circumstances?
Not at all, Mr. Truitt, and I want you to know that also I will not make age an issue of this campaign. I am not going to exploit for political purposes my opponent's youth and inexperience. If I still have time, I might add, Mr. Truitt, that it was Seneca or it was Cicero, I don't know which, that said, if it was not for the elders correcting the mistakes of the young, there would be no state. We were succeeding, and that was why the terrorist acts began. There are forces there, and that includes Syria in my mind, who don't want us to succeed. We did not engage in conflict that was out of line with our mission. I will never send troops anywhere on a mission of that kind without telling them that if somebody shoots at them, they can darn well shoot back. I'm not going to continue trying to respond to these repetitions of the falsehoods that have already been stated here, but with regard to whether Mr. Mondale would be strong as he said he would be, I know that he has a commercial out where he is appearing on the deck of the Nimitz and watching the F-14s take off, and that's an image of strength. Except that if he had had his way when the Nimitz was being planned, he would have been deep in the water out there because there wouldn't have been any Nimitz to stand on. He was against it. He was against the F-14 fighter. He was against the M1 tank. He was against the B-1 bomber. He wanted to cut the salary of all of the military. He wanted to bring home half of the American forces in Europe. And he has a record of weakness with regard to our national defense that is second to none.
So did you notice that? Did you see that clear change in tonality and inflection from being very level and almost, slightly upward inflections at the end of his sentences, bringing in humor, and then quickly he just navigates that call and gets into a more serious downward tone and obviously wants his points to command more authority. And I thought that was a very, very good, clear example where you can see someone switch from, having a level inflection, to then a downward inflection to really kind of deliver their message. Now, next up is Mother Teresa. Again, a completely different style altogether. However, incredibly effective nonetheless. Now, Mother Teresa was the Roman Catholic nun and was named the top 10 list of most admired women 18 times, and the Americans called her the most admired person of the 20th century. She won the Nobel Peace Prize back in 1979, nearly 30 years after she established the Missionaries of Charity, a new religious order devoted to the care of the poor and sick. Now, in this video that I'm about to play, I want you to pay attention to her pace, delivery, and also once again, the use of pauses to emphasize certain points. Now, the volume at which she speaks slowly draws you in, and you almost feel like the warmth of her words. Naturally, her agenda was completely different to anybody that we've studied thus far in this masterclass. So it's really good to see kind of that empathy and that warmth come across with her message, but she's still using those typical pace and delivery and pauses to really emphasize certain points. So let me let this one run now.
Where does this love begin? In our own family, in our own home. How does it begin? By praying together. Family that prays together stays together. And if you stay together, you will love one another as God loves each one of you. Today, in the world, there's so much suffering because of that want of prayer, of unity in the family. So today, when we are together, let us make one strong resolution that we will bring prayer in our family, that we will teach our children to pray and pray with them. And you will see the joy and the love and the peace that will come into your hearts. Because the fruit of prayer is the deepening of faith. And the fruit of faith is love. And the fruit of love is service. And the fruit of service is peace. Works of love are works of peace. That is why let us bring the tender love of God in our families.
And there you have it. No, look, her presence is completely different, as were her motives. But it's also very interesting to see that, when she's speaking, in the beginning, she draws you in. It's more upward inflections. And then she starts to kind of make some statements that she really firmly believes. And as she's doing that, unconsciously perhaps, she's switching into a downward inflection and letting her points be known. Okay, so next up in this masterclass is Martin Luther King Jr. Now, he was an American Baptist minister, an activist who became the most visible spokesperson and leader in the civil rights movement from 1954. Now, King was an incredible orator. He understood the power of cadence and how to energize an idea with forward thrust through repetition in his words. And he was a student of the game, this guy. Admittedly, he was studying the great orators that came before him. He reportedly would often be up until 4 a.m. the night before his speeches, rewriting them again and again and again. Practice is really key. I can't stress that enough. And King was really heavily influenced by the oral sermonic traditions of the Protestant church as a pastor. And this is really evident in his communication style. In the next video, I want you to pay close attention to the pace and the cadence of his speech. Then, at the use of the pauses that he uses and the high volume to lift emotions. It's almost like yelling once again. He really lifts that volume and heightens the emotion. This is taken from King's last speech. Not his most famous I Have a Dream speech, but I feel like this is really like after he was at his height at the game of really kind of delivering powerful speeches. So let me let this one run. And again, don't just watch it, right? I really want you to pay attention to what he's doing with his metaverbal communication.
All we say to America is be true to what you said on paper. If I lived in China or even Russia or any totalitarian country, maybe I could understand some of these illegal injunctions. Maybe I could understand the denial of certain basic First Amendment privileges because they haven't committed themselves to that over there. But somewhere I read of the freedom of assembly. Somewhere I read of the freedom of speech. Somewhere I read of the freedom of press. Somewhere I read that the greatness of America is the right to protest far right. And so just as I say we aren't going to let any dogs or water hoses turn us around, we aren't going to let any injunction turn us around. Well, I don't know what will happen now. We've got some difficult days ahead. But it really doesn't matter with me now because I've been to the mountaintop. I don't mind. Like anybody, I would like to live a long life. Longevity has its place. But I'm not concerned about that now. I just want to do God's will. And He's allowed me to go up to the mountain. And I've looked over and I've seen the promised land. I may not get there with you, but I want you to know tonight that we as a people will get to the promised land. So I'm happy tonight. I'm not worried about anything. I'm not fearing any man. Mine eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord.
Very powerful stuff. As you can see, once again, a completely different presence, message, speaking, and communication style all around, right? However, it's really interesting to see the nuances and the way in which he uses that cadence and kind of shifts from bringing you in to then heightening the emotion, all with his pace and the volume in which he speaks. And this brings us to the end of today's masterclass, and these are just a handful of some of my favorite orators and masters of communication and persuasion. And I hope you really learned a lot out of this kind of, me breaking down and analyzing these speeches, and I hope that this will serve you for the way that you communicate, not just in sales, but the way that you go out in your daily life. And I have included the links in the resources section to these full speeches. And what I urge you to do is really become a student of masterful communicators, and more importantly, train and analyze your own oratory presence. Work on it, strengthen it, and perfect it. For this skill will serve you for the rest of your life. So I hope you enjoyed this, and I'll see you in the next video.